You'll get a lot of advice from many different, very smart people. Sometimes those people will tell you the complete opposite things. Don't get too obsessed with your early cap table. Things are going to change, things are going to move all around. Think about the equity as something you have and allocations as a founder. Budget those allocations and use them to maximize your success and your business's success in the right amount of time. Trusting your teammates, save the intense disagreements for the things that really matter.
Welcome to the future, a chapter full of insights about technology and lessons about how we can adapt tech to our modern lifestyle. For this, we are with Zachary Rubin, who will tell us about how his vision and passion guide him through innovation and entrepreneurship, and more after working at Apple. Hope you enjoy it.
Juego de humanos, la historia detrás del personaje.
Hello humans, nice to see you again. Welcome to your global podcast, Juego de Humanos. Welcome to the human game. Here in Miami, another episode. I'm so happy, so grateful with all this season around the States. This is the last chapter of this season. I'm so happy because I have a really interesting guest for the final one. Emilio Jacome, who is a friend from Ecuador back at home, came to a camp here in the States and met this beautiful human which is called Zachary. Hey Zachary, nice to have you here.
Hey, thanks so much. It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. How's it going?
It's going well. Another beautiful day here in Miami. Good people all around. Can't complain.
Yeah, thanks to Techstars for letting us be here and record this podcast. It's funny, we realized that we have a banana here. For people who isn't on Spotify, you can go to YouTube and see this beautiful stage that we have here. And as I said before, in Ecuador we have the best bananas of the world, and we have it here. In these days, here in
But the ones in Ecuador probably taste a little better though.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Next time I'm gonna come with some bananas for you to the States. It's here in the as you can see. When I was in California, I record some podcasts in English because mostly the people speak English, but here everyone speaks Spanish. That I'm trying to do the switch. As you can see, I haven't been talking for a while. I'm already here like more than 2 or 3 weeks, I think. But yeah, I'm doing the switch to English. Well,
Para yo hablando en español es muy difícil, pero gracias para hablamos en inglés.
Yeah, thank you so much, and that was nice. You trying to talk in Spanish.
Very, very weak attempt.
Well, let's start from the beginning. For people who doesn't know who you are, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Zachary Rubin, and who am I? I'm sure we'll wander all through these things, but I'm a roboticist by training and have gone from kind of working in big tech to starting a number of startups, and I like to just play and create.
Yeah, that's nice. And as I said in this podcast, we like to go deeper than just business. And from the beginning, I would like to know what are you doing now? What are you playing in the human game?
So for me, work and play have always sort of been not two separate buckets, but one and the same. If I can create the kind of things and the kind of ventures that let me do more of the playing, then I'll just do that. And I think the way to do that is to have them make some money and to have them impact other people in the world too. And so that's one of the things that's been more and more in my mind over the years as I play with new technologies, new creations, and explore all the fun things there are to explore.
That's cool. And yeah, Emilio told me, and I saw your LinkedIn profile, that you are working in a Web3 and a new project. Can you let us know more about what are you doing? What are you creating now?
So the I'm sure many of your listeners have also followed along. It's gotten to be like an incredibly hot time in artificial intelligence. And so about 8 months ago, I started to really go deep into all the contemporary artificial intelligence approaches, kind of like I mentioned, by roboticist by training. So in some ways going back to my roots, and have been building a project or two every month, and have been playing with things, from artificial intelligence, interior designers to ones that'll do caricatures of your the favorite pets in your life, to chatbots that will help you find a romantic match, like a dating service, and have just been doing many fun projects like this for joy and as explorations, and then lately have kind of spun these all together and have started an agency that'll help do artificial intelligence product enablement for other businesses as a way to keep on playing and keep on exploring the different tech, so that now between myself and some of the other great AI minds I've gotten to know from the tech community, that when we find existing businesses that are looking to incorporate artificial intelligence in what they're doing, we have the tools, we have the know-how, we have a lot of existing code bases that we can repurpose and set up to deliver the kind of AI products that are now possible.
That's fun, because you are not just in one thing. You are like talking with different kind of customers, different kind of humans, different challenges, industries. That's really nice, and how AI it's going so fast, because as we can see some another disruption challenges around the years, the AI it's like something that it's going so fast, because there is a lot of databases that are connecting now, the hardware, the software. It's like and as you said, it's a hot moment now that everyone is talking about it. How did you ended up in this world before? Because we are recording this in the almost done April, the tech month here in Miami, and it just started like 3 or 2 months ago that everyone started to talk about it, but you start a little bit before everyone. How did you ended up?
Yeah, and I think just given where my interests are, I've always sort of like kept on the pulse of new emerging technologies that are about to reach maturity. And in the projects I like to take on, I like to be right in that space where there's a new emerging fundamental, whether, in maybe we'll get more into this, but my first robotics company, it was really the move of production lines into China that let you put certain componentry into a consumer product that wouldn't have been possible in the past. Web3 was enabling in a number of other ways. And now I've been following artificial intelligence, since I was in a research laboratory over a decade ago. And have kept up with it. I've kept finger on the pulse throughout my career, and then done minor projects with it here and there. Have been using GPT. It was 3 OpenAI's products for about 2 years now, and of course now that things are getting gotten really hot, it was just quickly apparent that this technology had reached the level of maturity that was needed to really be commercialized in a number of new ways.
When we see disrupt technologies, we realize, like, let's say when humans want to go to the moon, it takes us like 100 years. When we change a model of a car, it's 5 years. A new model of a cell phone, it's at least 1 year. But the ChatGPT, the 3rd version to the 4th version, it was like 3 or 4 months. Everything is going so fast. What kind of insights have you learned in this new expectation, this new moment of your life that you are focused on AI, like already 8 months, different industries? What have you learned so far?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, things have moved at such an incredibly fast pace that it's challenging even for like quick entrepreneurs to keep up with. And there's, I think, like a couple of interesting takeaways and transformations there, in that there's a lot of things that you are really great value creation businesses that you can stand up, but because the technology is evolving so quickly, the infrastructure that you build, the product that you have, your monetization plans and hypotheses may be invalidated in a couple months because the technology turnover. You know, you could invest, say, 40,000 in NRE and non-recurrent engineering. You know, have an engineering team brought up to build certain technologies, and then it's just change because the ecosystem, new tools are available. There's a new model out that will do a thing that you had to do custom in a way that is out of the box and turnkey. So, you know, it's a really exciting time because like the possibilities keep rolling out. But you know, there's different kinds of strategies that you need to employ when you think about getting your first customers in the door, building loyalty, and if there's any way to build a moat around a business like that. And you know, maybe I'll give one specific example. You know, I mentioned some of these projects I've been doing. So, for instance, one of this is, I guess, the second AI project as I was getting into this was a pet portrait generator. So I'm sure like most people played with Lensa. Started building this in sort of September, which was the pre-Lensa era. Had just kind of like been playing with DALL-E and Stable Diffusion and learned, you know, ways to train a model on a custom object. So it's like, I'm gonna make one for people's pets. This will be fun. You know, we'll donate a portion to it was actually, we have a allocation for homeless animals in Puerto Rico, and it's like, okay, this should be a pretty durable business. There's precedent for people wanting this sort of product. We can now do it, you know, 100 times faster and 10 times and 100 times cheaper than it would take for a human to make a fun portrait of the animal in somebody's life. So, you know, at that particular moment, the project required a lot of infrastructure building, setting up like a flexible GPU architecture that would turn on enough. I assume listeners are familiar with like units of a graphics processor, which is a special type of hardware that's needed to run a lot of this artificial intelligence models. And at that particular point in time, you really had to build a lot of your own infra to deploy the model, to run it on a server, then to scale up multiple instances that had that kind of hardware, manage the amount of time because you're renting that hardware time, and that's the most expensive cost associated with the business. So there's a lot of attention to detail that you need to pay to building that sort of technology. And so that was a pretty significant undertaking that you know, I spent a fair amount of time on personally, and then just a few months later, the world changed. You know, there's APIs available that just do that for you. You know, another thing that was really interesting and to follow was the Lensa phenomenon, which, like, having a product that was, you know, at the time that Lensa really had its moment, mine was a couple weeks away from launch, and seeing like, wow, products like this will grow at such an incredible rate. I think that was just also a month or so before ChatGPT came out, and then, you know, even furthered the growth benchmark for what an AI product can do. So, you know, when you're building a product that seems like it can you know, have value for, in my mind, this one had, you know, a few year lifespan. But then it was like, reality check, this is going to have a moment, and the moment's going to be about a month, and then the world's going to look different again. So it's a pretty interesting time and new set of challenges, I think, for whether it's like solopreneur kind of projects or even projects that are trying to get VC backing.
Whoa, that's a lot of stuff. Now in my mind, it's like I have a lot of questions about this topic. And yeah, I would like to talk about the future of jobs. How do you see in the short time? Because there is a lot of news, a lot of people telling that thousands and millions of people are gonna lose their jobs. How do you see the the future in the short period?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. So there's certain areas that I think that you hear people worrying about the most, and those I'm actually more optimistic on. So I think it's just going to increase productivity, and so you imagine that sometimes people say, "Oh, it's cheating." You're using ChatGPT to write this code or to do this project. But if you think about how an employer is most likely going to look at it, well, instead of getting fired for using ChatGPT, I think people are going to be more likely fired for not using ChatGPT. And if you've got this incredible tool that'll increase productivity by an order of magnitude, like employers are very incentivized to want their staff to use that. So, it could be more like certain at the business level could be more cutthroat. You'll be able to do with maybe with a 10-person team what you needed a 50-person team to accomplish, especially as more of these products and services roll out. And there will be, just an amount of turnover and change in jobs, and the change in the way that people do their jobs. Some of the aspect that I'm worried about is some of the fundamental skill building. So, my industry in coding, this would look like an internship. Personally, and for a lot of people I know, the intern stage, like in my education, was one of the most meaningful stages where I've got a mentor. I'm getting kind of simple coding projects, learning the ropes, learning philosophy of building, and naturally like adding some value. My value is small at the time of being an intern, is small compared to other people who are more senior at the firm, but it's still symbiotic. And one of my serious concerns is that symbiosis deteriorates, because right now the level of a chat GPT is, I would say, probably enough to replace an intern, like a very inexperienced programmer in the simple tasks that can just be done right away. So I think it's a real question of like, how are people of that stage going to really get the kind of programming experience that they need? And there's possible solutions. Maybe it's your internship is actually with the chat GPT as a mentor. And there's like coding boot camps that are automated and interactive, and you're working with an AI. But, I don't know exactly what that looks like. Or is that going to be as helpful to an intern who doesn't have the sort of like person-to-person mentorship? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, sure. And what I can see about what you said is, there is a lot of work that we are gonna need to do it, and we as humans we have to be focused on add value to the business, and it's gonna change. Let's talk about the developers and mostly our community. It's founders of startups, and it's gonna change the huge teams that we have of developers, and it's like pretty expensive now to use this kind of. My mind was like broken when you said, okay, people are gonna fire people who doesn't use ChatGPT, because it's a new tool that can improve and increase your productivity, and you can focus on. Now I see developers just focus on make the code that people tell you to do it, not like, hey, these products are gonna be useful and people are it's gonna get traction, the products, and you should be focused on that, not just as developers, as builders that are not thinking about the business or adding value, just thinking to write code. How do you see in the short term, what kind of tools you can recommend us to use to write the code, to do the code reviews? Because as I have this conversation some weeks ago in San Francisco, and people told us that don't be afraid about to use the tools. Try to go and explore and try to learn how does it works. And it's not like it's gonna write the whole code. It's just gonna give you like the way of how you should go, or where you should go. Is it like this?
Yeah, no, I would say so. So, the tools, there's probably the ones that most people are familiar with, which is Copilot and ChatGPT. There's, also just in the past week, 2 more open source large language models came out. One from Stability AI, the same people that did Stable Diffusion, and another one from Hugging Face. Now, I haven't tried the one from Stable Diffusion, but I know the one from Hugging Face can also generate code. Haven't seen side-by-side benchmarks comparing the 3 of them yet, but there are going to be options out there. It's very interesting to see the code generation really paired with GPT agents. Familiar, and I guess I'll go through those for anybody who's not familiar, but these have been getting very popular because it's the same technology, but put in an iteration loop. And you can define a high-level goal, and then the agent is given the high-level direction. What's the goal? Maybe it's write a complete app, and then from that stage they break it down. Okay, let's come up with a product spec. Let's break it down. Let's define the software components, and then for each one of those threads, it will go and solve those problems individually and loop the whole thing together. So we are working towards the paradigm where we really can have it solve the high-level problems. It's not there yet, but it's certainly coming. And I think the more options are available, so OpenAI doesn't have a closed monopoly on this stuff, it makes the ecosystem overall more robust, and I think solidifies the long-term outcome of these things being available.
Nice. Well, for people who doesn't use these tools yet, Copilot can use. We already did the setup with our team, and it's not difficult. But now, how can you use it? Do you have some hacks that you can share with us to use it in the right way? Because ChatGPT, it's also my developers told me that it's easier and they save time when they have some questions that they used to go to Google and try to read some websites and I don't know, something that they don't know. It takes an hour or 2, and now they go to ChatGPT and it's just 5 minutes now. Is it just for searching ChatGPT?
No, I think it's a lot more. You can, let's see, what are some couple quick examples of things that I find it's really good at helping me save time are for regular expressions, or often called regex. And so that's complicated pattern matching. You need to search through a string and pull out a specific piece of information or take out certain characters, or it's a certain way of parsing textual information, that's much, much faster than using an AI to run through it and do it for you. Well, you can have the AI create the pattern matching code that you need. And that's it used to be one of these things that you would go to sort of a seasoned, old and wise type of programmer who's really worked with that a long time, or just bite the bullet and dive deep and learn it really well, and then you use it to solve this one problem and you're really proud of your solution, and then a month later you forget it. So it's little tricky pieces of code like that are that you might pick up and put down a couple times when you're going through a project. It's good at jumping in and helping with those, or kind of extending or making that example a little bit more abstract. Anytime you want to jump into something that is, let's say 80 to 90% new and foreign. I think if it's 100%, if you haven't coded before, you could absolutely learn, but it's still going to be a challenge. But if you have enough to really understand what it's telling you, and you have even just that 10 to 20% familiarity with the concepts, then it can really accelerate you going into a new domain, picking up a new library or toolkit or information realm that you would need to build something new.
Cool. And what about Copilot? Can you share with us 3 examples of how we can use it?
Yeah, so the underlying technology for both Copilot and ChatGPT is very similar. It's they're using certain models from OpenAI to analyze the code and give you certain suggestions. Copilot works as a plugin to your Visual Studio editor, so that as you're editing and working through the code base, you can get intelligent suggestions on, fill in the blank. Here's the function that I need. Where maybe as the human, you write the comment. Maybe you have it write the comment after you've written the code. And that one I find, because of the seamlessness of the it exists as a plugin integration, it works really well for things that maybe you wouldn't go all the way to the browser for, and you think you could do yourself, but you just want to move more quickly. Like, it doesn't even have to be something that you don't know. It could just be, you've got to write out these utility functions, and it might take you like 10 or 15 minutes. But with Copilot plugged in, you tell it what you want to do, and then it fills it out, and you press one key, and there's a big time savings, even if it is knowledge that you could do yourself.
Wow, it's crazy. And it's just the beginning. Well, after this whole conversation about AI, we're going to keep going in this podcast. And as we have talked before, we think the successful, it's funny for me because I'm trying to translate in my mind, because this phrase I usually say it in Spanish, but it's full of failures to get a successful. And well, I would like to know, you have met a lot of founders all around these years. How is the most typical 3 mistakes that you see in a new founder in an early stage?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to take a minute to think about that before I just start talking about answers. Because there are a lot. There are a lot of things that might seem obvious, and it might seem intuitive to do it one way, but a lot of founders make this kind of mistake.
Okay, just with that, let's go to commercials and we will be back.
Tu logística, simple y a tiempo. A través de nuestra plataforma, contrata y gestiona tus envíos a todo el país. Tu felicidad es la nuestra. Tus éxitos son los nuestros. Así construimos un mejor país. Tus envíos y entregas a otro nivel. Ágil, rápido y seguro. Tú nos importas. Buscamos la mejor opción para tus envíos con seguridad y precio justo. Expande tus límites y llega con tus productos a todo el país. Vive una experiencia diferente. Vive la experiencia Bow. La logística del futuro, hoy.
Bow te conecta.
Envíos con propósito.
Hey humans, we are back. Gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, this global podcast who is traveling around the world, discovering humans who has purpose in their life, humans who wants to create a better world between technology and art. And yeah, so happy to be here. So happy to be with Zach. And how are you doing, Zach? How is everything going on with this podcast?
So far, so good. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Cool to hear that. Well, did you already think of the answer of the most typical mistakes about founders?
Yeah, so I guess to get back to your question, what are the 3 of the most typical mistakes that first-time founders make? Maybe at first, kind of answering that with a little bit of a meta response. And this is one thing I found that was really just interesting to me as going through some of my early experiences in starting companies. And you'll get a lot of advice from many different very smart people, and sometimes those people will tell you the complete opposite things. You can have 2 conversations, ask them for a specific piece of advice on a situation, talk to 2 people who are independently very well credentialed, bright, successful, good people to be giving you advice, and they can tell you the complete opposite thing. So really, one of your difficult jobs as a founder is going to be sorting through that noise and understanding whose advice is really relevant and digesting it. And really, at the end of the day, you've got to make the best calls for your business, and that's what's going to drive your success. It's good to hear and get the advice as much as possible, but sometimes very bright people are going to be wrong too.
Yeah, that's a typical thing. There is a lot of noise everywhere. Also in social media, a lot of content that you don't know how. When you're a first founder, you don't know in what you have to focus on, because there is a lot of stuff like go to go to the market, product market fit, marketing, sales, fundraising, and a lot of things that you don't know how to be focused on what thing, and your brain just start to mix everything.
Yeah, it's true. So I guess maybe that's a good segue into the first real piece of advice, which I would say is get your product onto market, get into users' hands, test. I'm not the first person to say that, I'm sure. And it's easy to get caught up into wanting to build the perfect product, into getting all the features, into there's something that'll really excite you and you'll want to go and build that and have it important to the first release. But get something minimal, get something that is really just enough to create value and prove that your hypothesis on what you think your customers are going to want, and get it into their hands, see if you can get them paying a little bit of money for it, and then start to invest more of your time and resources into the other parts of the product that are going to make it better and better.
Cool. Let's go with the second one.
Okay. Yeah, the second one is typically looking through the lens of you're going like the venture-backed startup route. I'd say don't get too obsessed with your early cap table. Things are going to change. Things are going to move all around. Maybe you'll get re-upped down the line. Maybe like lots of things will happen. I think one of the pieces of bad advice that I took from, I think it was either like a Sequoia or an Andreessen partner that was talking on a panel on a YouTube video I was watching, was, he was saying, your equity is like gold, protect it at all costs, don't give it away. And I found that was a really bad advice, for me in the situation and so forth, where I think it's better to use the equity, look at it as you've got so much, plan ahead, plan through, your financing rounds, think about your target ranges for the ownership that you'd like to hold on to, that you think of as allocations for your investors, think of your allocations for employees and the people that you're going to need to use that equity to compensate and incentivize, and be a planner instead of being, like Smog the Dragon, where you're guarding the gold at all costs and wanting to pay everybody as little as possible at each step along the way. Think about the equity as something you have, and allocations as a founder, budget those allocations and use them to maximize your success and your business's success in the right amount of time.
I think this is a really, really good one, because sometimes you think like, I don't have to. It's like my treasure, and it's just the beginning. Yeah, let's go with the next one.
Okay, so yeah, a third piece of advice I'd give is just about working with others. And another thing that I've certainly been guilty of, especially early on, and I've seen other first-time founders get caught up in, is being too stubborn with people that you're working with, and feeling like too much is invested in small decisions that frankly don't matter. And so I think another important job of the founder is to be able to zoom out and see that like some of the day-to-day decisions, it's going to be okay with whatever you choose. Is this button going to be in, blue, or is it going to be in green? Sometimes the reason you're a founder is because you care so much about the whole experience and everything else. But sometimes you need to, especially if you're working with other people that you trust to do a good job, you need to actually show them that trust, and sometimes be flexible on the things that don't matter, so that when something comes along that really does matter, then that's when there's a time to be stubborn or to enforce your opinion. And those times will definitely come up. There are going to be times where you really need to have things a certain way, as whether you're the founder or even a co-founder in some things in your domain. But it's not helpful to a business to have multiple partners who are overly invested in all the decisions across. I think it's better to have people that are that are very competent. If you're working with somebody and you don't trust them to make those decisions on their own, and you don't trust them enough to be able to say, okay, we're going to do things your way because you're an expert in this category, then maybe they're not the right person for you to work with. So I'd say trusting your teammates, even in not sweating the small stuff, and save the intense disagreements for the things that really matter.
That's a really good one, because sometimes we try to take control of everything, and the whole responsibility comes to the founders, and the employees doesn't feel the same responsibility about the decisions, because if there is a mistake, I'm not thinking about what to do. I'm just going to the founder and say, hey, what should I do? A, B, or C? And you are the person who takes energy to thinking everything, and sometimes there is mistakes. There is always mistakes, and people doesn't feel that fail. I mean, for sure they feel it, but they don't. They are not gonna grow until you let them go and let trust in the team.
Yeah, you know, there's a fine line there too between, and the way you would act on this kind of advice depends on the circumstance you're in. If you're working with somebody who's junior to you and reporting up to you, or if this is you working with other partners that you see as equal. I'm a fan of like the hacker hipster hustler framework for what are the skills that you would want on a founding team, and there are all sorts of variations for that, especially depending on the startup you're trying to start. But if there's one person who's your hustler and they're doing everything on the business and customer side, you're your hipster who's making everything look beautiful and getting the customers excited, and your hacker who's the one who's building. And let's say you've got some variation of that on your team. Trusting each person to really excel at what they're good at, and then some amount of room. If you think they're screwing up, let them. And then if it happens too much, then they're not the right person, and then you need to make that call and find the right person as early and as soon as you can. But otherwise, like having the understanding that if it's in their domain and you disagree with them, you're more likely wrong than they are. And if that's not the way that you feel or not the way that you think, then ask yourself why.
Cool. And how can I realize when it's important how can I do the priority of the decisions and the projects that I can let the team go, and the ones that I have to take the decision? How can I realize what it matters and what it doesn't in this world full of noise?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. There's a couple different frameworks that you can think about it. So certain decisions that you have, it's a startup. Things are going to change all the time. So think like, does this thing need to be decided now? Is this conversation, is it crucial, or are there more important things that you can just be spending time on? And even just looking at is going deep and you're at some disagreement, is solving it and spending 3 hours solving it going to be the most important thing that you can do for that day? Or are there things that are just more important, and it's better to let somebody else have their way, say, okay, move on, and then get both of you unlocked, 2 people, 3 hours each, have those 6 hours deployed elsewhere. And I think that's maybe the first thing that I think of when I think of okay, is this worth spending more time on or moving forward? And then others, you can think of if it is crucial and it is something that's going to have an impact right away, how soon will the impact of that be measured? How soon will we know definitively, is this going to be right or wrong? And then we can test and evaluate.
Cool. Totally right. I 100% agree, because and this is a cultural insight that we have to change in our startups. As you said, the startups are changing so fast all the time, and there is always a lot of work, and something that can be pretty important for this week maybe in the next week or in after some days or some weeks or some months, there is no more important than how it was, and we have to let the team know that there is something else that is more important about this, because we create this kind of culture. I realize I have been traveling for almost 2 months since I came back to Ecuador for 4 months, and I saw an email that the people was buying cups for coffee in the office, and it was 3 emails, and they still didn't buy the cups of coffee. When I see this example, I said, "Fuck! How do we act like a corporate? It doesn't have to be like this." And this is the okay. After I saw the 3 emails, and I said, "Okay, first of all, I have to see that I create this kind of culture." Because there is always full of work, and I am a person who like the perfection and the detail of everything. And when you realize that not everything is important, I have to make this switch to change the rest of the people, because it's not gonna change just with one email or one conversation. I just said in that moment, did you see this? It's already 3 emails for buying cups for coffee. This is not important for the company, and you have to always every day think what is important for it. And as founders or leader teams, we have to let the team know what is the 3 most important things for a week.
Yeah, and sometimes it is something that is important. It's just not important right now. And I think as humans, we have trouble sorting those things out. And at one of the first startups I worked for, one of the wise elders and said, the thing that we're really good at that lets us succeed is triage. It's just triage. It's seeing all the problems that we have, because there's always going to be a long list of problems, understanding which are the most important ones to solve right now and solving those ones first. So, if you can do that, then, you're one step ahead.
This is a pretty important, a critical skill that I have to work on it, and for sure there is some of founders that has to do the same, because I can see that this is a typical mistake that mostly a lot of people does. Okay, well, it has been a pretty interesting conversation. Now, after we saw and put the hacks about his experience, now I would like to know more about the human behind the character, and also
Secretly a robot.
Okay, then let's talk let's go back. Okay, let's forget about the human game and go to the beginning of your life. Let us know how it begins. How was when you were a small robot like that one, and now a human like this one?
Yeah, what was it like? Where do you even begin?
Where did you grow up?
Right, so grew up in Southern California. Was born in a town called Santa Barbara, and grew up.
LA.
Yeah, Santa Barbara, about an hour and a half north of Los Angeles. I grew up sort of in between the two, in a little town called Oxnard. Right by the beach. Hard for me to imagine living anywhere that's not by a beautiful ocean. That's why I can also feel very at home here in Miami. Themes throughout my life still that are consistent from childhood are passionate about the beach, about the ocean, as a place for both recreation. I grew up as a surfer and skimboarder, and just playing and loving the ocean, and feel strongly about other endeavors that as humanity we need to be doing to protect it. It's a very special place. These days, one of the big things I do miss about California being here in Miami is there's not quite as much surf out here, but have really taken to diving. And that's something, if you're thinking about it, would highly recommend. Really opens up a whole new realm of existence when you can go beneath the surface and hang out with the creatures that live there.
Okay,
cool. A little bit of an aside.
When you go back to your childhood, what kind of colors, smells came to your mind?
Maybe it's only top of mind because we're talking about so many other ocean things. But yeah, I grew up right there by the beach, so I do think of like the blues of the sky and the ocean and the warm beige colors of the sand.
What about the food? What do you remember and miss from home?
Yeah, such good Mexican food back home. Southern California has some really great like hole in the wall kind of like informal Mexican shops that are delicious.
It's so funny to hear American talking that means Mexican food. Yeah, it's strange when you're in California. Mostly more than the 80% of the cities and towns are calling Spanish. Like you can see.
Yeah, true. I mean, even Oxnard that I mentioned, I think is 70% of Mexican descent.
Yeah, and yeah, did you have any Spanish or Hispanic people, Hispanic friends, like when you were child?
Yeah.
This is how you have your little Spanish.
Yeah. No, actually, I had a good friend from who he was Californian, but his father was from Ecuador.
That's really interesting to know. Okay, well, let us know more about the next chapter of your life. How did you ended up in the tech world?
Yeah, it was, I think, very clear to me from early on that this is the route I wanted to go. And I think that, if there are younger listeners, that's one thing that I see as being very differentiating from and helpful. As early as you know what it is you're really passionate about, go for it. No need to wait, no need to slow roll, just chase it and do the kind of things that you think you would that are going to be important. Talk to and get to know the adults that are really excelling in the areas that you want to excel, the kind of people who have careers you would want to model yours after. Get to know them and no need to wait. Just do the thing that you want to eventually do, even if it's in a small way, even if you're just getting to know it. And for me, it always kind of seemed like play, whether it was building computers and taking things apart, learning to program in Linux. I was a big fan of like the BattleBots TV show, this one. But that was, formative as a kid, and, would build similar sort of things out of Legos and would have little, all sort of Lego robotics projects. And then.
And did you start with software or hardware?
It was a little bit of both. I guess if like thinking about, what was I, 9 years old or so when the Lego robotics
9 years old, your whole life.
Yeah. And it was, I know, I do think I'm very fortunate to have had that kind of upbringing. My dad was also an engineer who went on to start companies, but I don't want to also like give the impression that you need that. It's like it was helpful. It set me on this track. It made me feel like it's a little bit in the blood, but I think you can come from any sort of background. Don't think anybody who's listening should feel like, because I don't have this, it's not for me. But I would say look out to try to get the right role models in your life. Be around the kind of people, ask them lots of questions, hang out with them. Don't feel bad about going out of your way, or don't feel like you're bothering them. Just go and show up at their doorstep and see if you can get involved with what they're doing, so that you can learn from the people that have done it. And so that did get to. From a very young age, I remember being like, this little 5-6-year-old with ADD, and my dad's teaching me how to solder little circuits. And the TV's on in the background, and I've got ADD, so I'm like looking over and burning myself with a soldering iron as I'm like trying to solder. Somewhere I've got like a great picture of myself as, like a little blonde-haired 5-year-old, like soldering a circuit.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Interesting story. And when you start to work like in a formal way, I saw that you had worked in so many companies as Google, as Apple, and you were in Cupertino, right?
Sunnyvale, yeah.
How was that experience working to Apple?
It was really great, eye-opening in a lot of ways. Had known that I'd always wanted to go into startups and seen the kind of had spent some time working for a startup. The startup I'd worked for was doing electric motorcycles, and then went on to work for Apple in a new products division, and saw it's very different worlds. And I would say for skill development and upping my abilities as an engineer, really the startup culture, people were working at a very aggressive pace. There was a lot of passion and really like great friendships that were made there. And yeah, contrasting that to Apple, it was a lot of in both cases extremely bright people that Apple was, I think, able to just pull in like some of the most genius minds you can imagine that are thinking about far out technologies, and they had the capital to be able to invest in like making science fiction into reality. So that was really special to be part of that. Opened my eyes to some other things too, that I had this conception about, wow, like starting a startup is such a challenge, because on top of everything else, well, let's say an Apple or Google wants to do what you do. Well, they've got so much capital, they can just snap their fingers, and why couldn't they make it happen? But that couldn't be farther from the truth. If there's something sometimes that you think, oh, well, Google or Apple or Amazon really should be doing this thing, but they're not doing it, there's oftentimes like some big institutional inertia where the amount of buy-in that you need to have at a big company to make decisions, to move forward, to get budget, to actually bring a product to market is so much more than if you're operating as a small team, that it creates a real opportunity space for small companies.
Whoa. You already replied like the next 3 questions. I was going to ask you what is the difference between but you already answered it.
Tu logística, simple y a tiempo. A través de nuestra plataforma, contrata y gestiona tus envíos a todo el país. Tu felicidad es la nuestra. Tus éxitos son los nuestros. Así construimos un mejor país. Tus envíos y entregas a otro nivel. Ágil, rápido y seguro. Tú nos importas. Buscamos la mejor opción para tus envíos con seguridad y precio justo. Expande tus límites y llega con tus productos a todo el país. Vive una experiencia diferente. Vive la experiencia Bow. La logística del futuro, hoy.
Bow te conecta.
Envíos con propósito.
Okay, thank you for being here with the podcast. Thanks to Bow Company for let us be here. If you are an e-commerce company and you want to go to Latin America, we can take care of everything of your shipments and payments. You can just take us. Here is Bow Company. Thank you for give us the opportunity to Juego de Humanos, to be traveling around the world, discovering humans with purpose. Well, here we are ready for the final part of this podcast. It's called the Life Go. It's let me translate it because I'm thinking in English. La vida va más allá del juego de humanos, which means the life goes deeper than the human game, let's say. And yeah, I would like to know are you happy, Zach?
Am I happy?
What is happiness for you?
What is happiness? I think, and this comes along with so many of the themes we've talked about, happiness to me is so tied with creativity, and just the things that make me happiest are breathing life into something new, especially when it affects somebody else, and then it spreads excitement, it spreads inspiration, it shows other people that something new is possible that they didn't think was possible before. I think those moments have been so inspiring for me, and it makes me so happy to create things that spread that to others. And yeah, it's many of those happy moments have kind of come in hand with the new projects like I talked to you about in the beginning of the podcast.
What will you say to you when you were in 20?
What would I say to myself when I was 20?
Yeah.
Good question. Probably hand myself a copy of that book, The Defining Decade, where I don't know if you've read or seen that one, but I think there's some really great advice for people that are entering their 20s about how that period you really set yourself on a trajectory. You set up the kind of habits that aren't unchangeable, but are more difficult to change later on, and it really can shape the person that you're going to be for the rest of your life. And that was something I didn't discover until my late 20s, but I did. Not to say that dissatisfied with how things turned out, but I think there's some really great gems in there about how to be more thoughtful about everything that you do over those years.
How do you see the world in 50 years?
That's another one. I think it's going to be very interesting. It's hard to really predict. 50 years is a long time. It's almost twice as long as I've been on this earth. So 50 years from now, we're talking about the year 2073, and things are going to be very different. Like what we're starting to see now, and I think it's easy to look at what's the most interesting technologies of your contemporary time and extract those out specifically for the next however many years. And this is like only a little bit of a meandering answer, but I think it's been pretty interesting to look at what future predictions have looked like throughout history. What did people 200 years ago think the 2000s would be like, and in the 1800s. And one of my favorite is sort of like the Jacques Cousteau Victorian era, where they were just starting to make these early industrialized mechanical advances. So their predictions of the future were all very mechanical. We'd have these great intricate mechanic contraptions that were doing all sorts of wonderful things. And that's happened to an extent, but not nearly as much as things like software, like totally new advancements that we hadn't thought of have come in and really reshaped things. And who could you have told in the probably like very few people could you have told in the early 1800s about the computer revolution and exactly how that would take shape. So now because we're on such an exponential rate of change curve, that the differences between what today looks like and 50 years from now, I think could look far and beyond more different than even like the changes between now and 200 years ago. And, as you go back further and further in history, you can have periods of, 500, 1,000 years where the day-to-day looked pretty similar. And seeing now, you think of what things looked like a decade ago, there was more change over the last decade than there was last 2 decades than there was in some 500,000 year periods of human history.
It's crazy.
So thinking about things that way and looking forward, next 50 years are going to be really wild. And what is it going to look like? In the limited view of only, seeing this small window on, this exponential curve that's looking forward a longer span than I've even been on this earth. It's some of the wild things I think we could see on the technology realm are what it means for humanity to be interacting with intelligences that far exceed our own, where those intelligences don't just live in computer systems, they're interacting with the full world, and we've either merged with them and at birth, or our births are facilitated by these machines, and there are certain things where our biology is useful, or maybe humanity's presence is spread beyond just planet Earth, and that presence could just be through robots and artificial intelligence, or it could be embryonic, and we sent humans that aren't yet humans off to other planets, and they're trained by these systems. For looking at we talked a little bit about the ocean and how important that is. and it's in a lot of trouble today. And optimistically, to hope that we really realize the significance of preserving some of these ecosystems, and that could make the next 50 years look very different in terms of food scarcity and disease and our ability to continue to thrive as a human species. My nearer term, very optimistic prediction is that you talked about what happens if AI gets rid of all these jobs. I think that would be wonderful, and if humans need a sort of non-economic purpose, I think that should be restoring the planet, undoing the damage that the Industrial Revolution has done, and helping preserve that and doing some of the things that the machines can't do yet. That's a whole nother conversation about how we might be able to pull that off with the people who might be out of work. And so, thinking about what the other things that could really be radically different in the next 50 years, also just what our biology is. Some of the things that are already on the early stages of commercialization are cultured meats for human consumption. So things are like 3D printing cells in whether it's lab trays or in other surfaces. So you don't need to harvest a full animal to consume it. And I think that is another thing that could really reach maturity, I think more in 15-year time frame. And that's going to change the way that the whole food supply chain really works. In that, if it's really mainstream in 15 years, fast forward another 35 on top of that, it would be everywhere, where we're not farming anymore. We're not raising livestock except in maybe extreme niche applications where human consumption, to the extent that we still will need to consume other animal proteins to survive, can come from these sources that are artificially grown, and by that point will be more nutritious and more optimal and more efficient, and not having any of the damaging effects, both ethically and for the environmental systems that we're part of. Geopolitically, that's a whole other very interesting part of the world. That 50 years is such a long time frame. I would like to see, us in the West and in America. It would be great if we were able to adopt a political system that let us actually think in 50-year timeframes. But China seems to be the only one that is able to set that kind of agenda. And it'll be interesting to see if they keep on with their sort of long-term ability to plan and execute, or things seem to be moving faster at the present day than they have in the last few years. I think I heard the battery noise again.
Yeah, but let's keep going with this one.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, keep rolling there. I know I've probably given a long-winded answer and tried to touch as many of the close my eyes for a second and transplant myself 50 years in the future. I think those would be some of the most interesting things to observe.
This is one of the best answers that I have received, the most complete one, let's say. And can I take a seat with you?
Coming out. Are we still talking through the microphone?
Yeah.
Or is it just the camera?
No, it's also the microphone. It's working. Okay. Hey, humans. I'm here in this camera. We're almost done with the whole season. Even the camera is almost done. And yeah, you make me. I always answer for this question about the how people is gonna be the future. I always ask for this question, and yeah, I also transportate to myself in 50 years of how this is gonna be. Well, now we're almost done actually, and we're ready Are you ready for the final part of the podcast?
Let's do it.
All right. Can you imagine that you have the whole world is gonna watch you in the screens for 1 minute? What will you tell them from your heart to the whole the humans around the world? you can see that camera and start saying, "Hello, humans," and what will you say from your heart?
Hello, humans. Give me my 1 minute to speak from my heart. I'm going to revisit a topic that we touched on a little bit, and that's just about caring for some of the other ecological systems on this earth, about the oceans. And that doesn't just come from a place of being somebody that likes the oceans and, you know, likes spending time in them, has enjoyed visiting some of the creatures that live in them. This is existential for our own survival. For, you know, we want the future that's 50 years from now to be one where humanity continues to thrive and we can continue to explore all these amazing and interesting roads that the future of humans could take. We want to see, you know, where we increase our lifespans to, you know, 200 years and beyond. We want to become a species that can explore the planets. We want to become a species that can unlock all the secrets that physics has to offer. And in quantum biology is another one of my favorite topics that we haven't even gotten to touch. And that could all come to a very scary and sad halt if we let the environment in which we are really a part of as just one of many species on this planet fall apart. And even if we continue to survive, it won't be in kind of the beautiful environment in which we're so blessed to really grow up in. So do what you can. There's a lot of great resources out there, and I think take a moment to appreciate what we have and realize that there's work that needs to be done to preserve and restore it.
All right. Thank you so much. I did my best to talking English in this whole episode.
Amazing.
I can see it in my mind. I don't know, for some people, and here in Miami, there is a lot of Latino people who can switch immediately from one language to the another one. For me, it takes some time. When I was in California, the first day was like this, but after talking in English all day long with people, it's like I do the right switch to another language. But
Well,
I did my best for today. How was the podcast for you?
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks for having me
There
on.
was a lot of topics, and for sure, I would like to be back and having you back in this podcast. Take
Great.
care of yourself. Have a wonderful journey with the startup and everything, and we will see again in the future. I hope so.
I hope so as well. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, humans from all around the world. This is Juego de Humanos from Miami. I'm just feel so grateful. For sure, I'm gonna be back with this Ecuadorian banana. Bye, everyone.